Hello, my name is Juanita Urell, and I am a graduate student at Liberty University. My lecture today is going to be about enlarging my conversation. This is from the Human Services 508 graduate course, Studies in Interpersonal Communication. I must say that I already had a good idea about the basics on communication and how to communicate, and knowing that listening is a very important part of communication. But I will say that I have learned so much more about communicating from this course. So I'm gonna just talk a little bit about what I've learned and what I got from this course in today's lecture. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to talk about knowing my own style. And with knowing my own style, I do understand that there are 6 features of communication. The first feature is meaning, and that's for the person understanding, or the two parties involved, understanding that it's just not about one person. It's about knowing that there are 2 people involved, 2 people conversating. So each of you, or each person, has to be sure to make sure that they're understanding the meaning that's coming from the other person as they're communicating. Second feature is choice. And when I talk about choice, I talk about active and automatic. There are some choices that we make that just come automatic. We don't even think about it. We just do it, and it just comes natural. But there are some times when we have choices to make that we really have to stop and take a step back and think about it. So that's where being active comes in, because we have to take a little bit more thought before actually making a choice. Culture. The culture is definitely important, because you really have to understand that person's culture. For example, there may be a culture where the person, as they are talking to you, it is against their culture to look the person dead in the eye, or in the face. So they may tend to look away, or they may tend to look down. So that's where culture comes into play, and culture is very important because we have to make sure we understand that person's culture and understand what their rituals and traditions are, so that we, as we're talking to them, do not offend them as well. And identity. So basically, how we communicate and what we're communicating, what does that say about us? How does that identify us? How does that let the person know what we're about? So I always tell people, it's not about what you say, but how you say it. So there's always a way to get your point across, but be careful in how you're saying it, because perception is everything, in my opinion. So you just have to be careful. Conversations, from what I've learned, that ordinary conversations are the most influential. So it's not about maybe sitting down and talking about something big, politics. It's just sitting down, just having the conversation. Some people just want to be heard, or they just want someone to talk to. Just talk about how their day is going, or just talk about something that they've experienced. And what I have found is that, and I have experienced this, the most ordinary conversation, just having a conversation, it makes a big impact to some people. And then the 6th feature of communication is nexting. So from what I've learned, that this is the single most important feature. And this is basically saying, as you're conversating or as you're listening, you can be thinking about what you can do to help the conversation progress. Or this is what you can do to help influence what will happen next, based on what the person is saying. And when someone asks me about what my style is, I like to say that I'm a quiet leader type person. I feel like I don't always have to be saying something. I'm not big on talking, but I do love to listen. So I like to consider myself a quiet leader. I definitely, lead, but just in a quiet manner. I don't have to be heard. I just more so let my actions speak, and let that, talk about or display my leadership ability. I just more so add, as opposed to do a lot of talking. because I believe it's all about what you do and your actions. That says a lot about you. So we'll move on to the next slide. All right, listening and building identities. So what I've learned from here is that there are 3 core identity issues. The first one is, am I competent? I know just from my own experience when job searching, I tend to shortchange myself when going through a job search, because I may be questioning, if I see a position, I may question myself, well, am I competent? Am I able to do this job? So that's one issue. A second issue is, am I a good person? So that all boils down to when you have to have that hard conversation, because sometimes when you're having that conversation, you can already tell from the person that you're speaking to that their feelings might be a little hurt, or they may be a little offended. So when that reaction is given, then it may make you think, okay, well, did I do something wrong? Am I being mean? Or am I a bad person? When, truly that's not what your intent is. The third issue is, am I worthy of love? So I think a lot of that comes from seeing previous or past examples, or learning from past experiences where you may see someone who was mistreated. So you may just automatically think, well, this is how it's always been. So that's what it's going to be for me. That's what my destiny is going to be. Where that, definitely is not the case all the time. Well, that doesn't have to be the case. All right, in my next slide, I'm going to talk about 3 things. The book that's written by Stewart. There's a section in there where he talks about 3 things that we should be able to accept about ourselves. And this is so important, because I think it's important to strive for perfection, but I think it's also just as important to understand that no one is perfect, and it's okay to strive for perfection, with the understanding that you're not going to be perfect. Only Jesus Christ is perfect. But I think it's important to strive for perfection, because you want to do the best that you absolutely can. But it's okay to, number one, making mistakes. It's okay to accept that you're going to make mistakes. I feel like that's a very important part of learning, because if you don't learn what not to do, then when something does happen, and then you get a little bit excited, or you get a little bit panicked, because you're always striving to be so perfect and do things right, when something does go wrong, you don't know what to do. So it's okay to make mistakes, and also understanding that intentions are complex, because what one person may intend to do or say, or how that person wants the conversation to come across, it may not come across to that person with the same intent. So we have to understand that intentions are definitely complex, because what we intend to say or what we intend to mean may not come across as all in how that person is going to interpret it. The third one is contributing to the problem. So basically what that is saying, so don't make don't make matters worse, or don't avoid trying to have that conversation, because if you allow that person to move forward or go on without pulling to the side and saying, hey, this is what I'm noticing, then the problem is only going to get worse. It's only going to grow. So you don't want to contribute to the problem. So those are the 3 things that we have got to accept about ourselves. And then the book also talks about the all or nothing syndrome, and I have experienced that indirectly myself. It's either, okay, I'm either this or I'm either that, and sometimes it's okay to have a gray area, because it allows you to be flexible. So you don't necessarily have to say, okay, well, I'm competent or I'm not competent. Well, no, learn about what's in the middle. Learn about your strengths, but also learn about your weaknesses. That way you'll know, what you do have to work on. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, I'm this or I'm that. Let's find a balance in the middle. Okay, so let's find a balance in the middle, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be all or nothing. All right, move on to the next slide. Now, this next slide or the next section I really enjoyed because I never really looked at communicating as it breathing, inhaling or exhaling. So I thought that this section was very interesting, and I learned a lot about how you should be breathing and how your body should be functioning as you're communicating, whether you're listening or whether you're speaking. So this section is about communication barriers, perceiving and expressing. And inhaling is basically what is being taken in. So as you're listening, you want to make sure that you are calm and that you are inhaling. And I always tell my son when he's making free throw shots, when he's playing basketball, inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. So basically inhaling is what you're taking in. Make sure you're not necessarily make sure you're understanding, because sometimes you'll have to ask clarifying questions. So make sure you are taking in what the person is saying. And then on the opposite end of that is exhaling, and that's what is going out. So after you have inhaled and you've taken in, I always think it's good to sort of repeat what that person is saying, just so you have a good understanding of what they're saying, and then that you clarify what they're saying. And as I mentioned before, you may have to ask a few clarifying questions just so that you get a good understanding of what is being said. Now, resistance in conversation, then that's when you're having that hard conversation, because your intent is to help, but that person may not interpret it as such. So that's where you may get some resistance in conversations. A lot of times, just from my own personal experience, when you're trying to have that hard conversation, that person may very well shut down, and that wall has been built right up, and there's no way of getting around it. And pretty much that person, you have lost that person as far as conversating, or trying to maybe explain something. So that's where the resistance in conversation comes. All right, and just to talk a little bit further, going to my next slide, promoting dialogue and the listening response. So how do we make listening work? So according to the book that's written by last name Burley Allen, the book mentions 12 methods to improve listening skills. I don't have all 12 methods listed, but I did pick a few that I felt were important to me as I was going through this course. So I'm just going to talk about a few. The first one I chose was work at listening, and this is something that I didn't realize was so important, or that something that I had to do when it came to conversating. I didn't realize how much hard work it entails to really be a good listener, and it really takes a lot of emotional and mental strength to do that. So it's not something that comes easily or naturally for a lot of people, and I know for me it's something that I really do truly have to work at doing. The second one is also another challenge for me, and that's hold your rebuttal, because as you're listening to the person talking, sometimes you tend to already start to formulate what you're going to say or how you're going to come back, and while you're doing that, you're missing what the person is really saying. So it's important to hold that rebuttal, really get a good feel for what the person is saying, make sure you're understanding what the person is saying, make sure you get the meaning of what the person is saying before you come back with your rebuttal. The third one is keep an open mind. So definitely whenever the person is talking, what the person might be saying may be a little off, but you have to be sure to keep an open mind, especially when they're expressing ideas. I had this situation just happened to me just yesterday evening. A person was talking about a business venture, and I always tend to just shut down when it comes to business ideas or ideas as far as creating a stream of income. I just always tend to get a little hesitant, and so I have to learn to keep that open mind, because you just never know. It might be something that sparks your interest, so you just want to make sure you keep an open mind, because you don't want to miss out on something, because as soon as somebody starts talking about something, you just automatically just shut down and you don't want to hear it. And so also along with that, what you can do, you can always ask clarifying questions. So once you keep that open mind, and if it's something that does sound interesting to you, then that gives you the opportunity to, okay, well, let me ask more questions about this. What about this? How did this work? So not only does it let that other person know that you're interested, that you're listening, but it's going to also help you too, because if it's something that you do want to maybe venture in, maybe start, then you'll have a lot more information to go on before making that decision. And the last one I want to talk about is practice regularly. So again, like I said, it does take a lot of work to be an effective listener. But it's something that you have to do over and over and over again. So it's something where it's basically a habit. I've always heard that it takes 21 days to create a habit. So it's something that you've definitely got to work on continuously and practice. And sometimes you may even want to maybe do a role model or practice to maybe have someone speaking to you, and you just kind of regurgitate what that person is saying, just to make sure that you are truly listening and understanding what that person is trying to get across to you. But I think what's most important when it comes to the promoting of the dialogue and listening response is not trying to solve the issue. And that's something else that I have learned to do, and I have experienced just recently. I have a family member who, she and I were always walking as exercise, and a lot of times she'll find that time to vent, and so she'll be clear to tell me, Juanita, I'm just here to vent. I just want to be heard. So I just have to make sure that I just listen and just understand that she is just wanting to vent. If I do respond to her, it's more so just asking her questions. Well, I don't understand this. You just said this. So what did you say? Or so I may ask her a question to repeat something or to clarify something. But it's hard work for me to not want to give my advice or give my opinion because she has already expressed that she just wants to vent. So that's something that I have had to work hard on as well. Okay, going to the next slide. Okay, guidelines for talkers and communicating with family and friends. What I took from this section of the class was the meta message, which that term I had never heard of. So just to give a brief definition, according to Stewart from the text, the meta message is the unspoken message about the relationship between speaker and hearer. So the meta message is the unspoken message about the relationship between speaker and hearer. So basically it's what is said by the way something is said, who says it, or the fact that it is said at all. So this is important because I always go back to, there's a way that you can say things and get your point across, and not necessarily have to be forceful or not have to be mean, but there's a certain way that you can say things to let that person know, oh, okay, I do understand what she's saying now, or I do understand what she's getting at. So you can be saying something, but at the same time there's an underlying tone or an underlying message that the person will understand, so you know that it's not something that that's going to come out directly, but just from what you said, they're going to know, okay, I got you. All right, and from what I also learned with the meta messages, that they tend to be negative even though the intentions are good. So sometimes it doesn't even matter, what you're saying, that even though your intentions are good, it's going to be perceived that you are attacking them, or that what you're saying is negative. So sometimes it doesn't even matter what you say. It's just going to be perceived as being negative anyway at the end of the day. All right, my next slide is effective listening and communication walls. Now, according to Burley Allen's text, effective listening often depends on what is going on in the head and heart of those communicating. rather than what is taking place on the outside. Now, when I read that, I felt like, okay, when the person is talking, the person who is listening really don't truly know what is going on the inside in that person's mind or in that person's heart. And sometimes as we're communicating, we're probably more than likely coming from a place of love or a good place. But as I mentioned before, it all depends on how that person is going to interpret it, because you may be coming from a good place or a place of love, where the other person may think that they're being attacked and then shut down and the wall is built up. So they don't really truly know what is going on the inside. All they're seeing is what's going on is that you're talking to them and they're feeling like you're attacking them. It made me think about this song that was done back in the 90s, I believe. It's a song that's by a R&B group called En Vogue, and the name of the song is Free Your Mind. So as you're listening, you have to really just free your mind. You really have to just keep an open mind and just be open to what the person is saying and ask questions to get clarification, and not necessarily be so quick to take offense or be on the defense and think that you're being attacked. Really take a step back, because for the person to be talking about it and talking about it to you, it has to be something that has been observed. So just free your mind, and as the song said, free your mind and the rest will follow. So just keep an open mind, ask those clarifying questions, just so that you can get an understanding, because it may be something that as an example, that you may need to improve or that you may need to work on. So just be able to just free your mind and just open your mind, and be willing to listen. And, if nothing else, take it as a learning opportunity, or something that you may need to work on, and move forward with that. People living in reality and not wanting to face reality. There are some people who just want to live in the moment and not be concerned about, something that is truly going wrong or something that is truly bothering them. They just tend to just push that to the side, don't want to deal with it, but just to continue to move forward in life, and just knowing that they have this in the background that needs to be addressed. Sometimes people, when it's something that's hard, they don't want to talk about, they just don't want to address it. They don't want to bother with it. They don't want to address it, and they know that it's there. And that's something that has baffled me, because it just makes me feel like that person is, especially if there are two people, a married couple, it just feels like one person is being abandoned emotionally, and that one person is being left to shoulder and handle everything, while the other person just moves through freely and not worry about anything. So you got to not only just be able to live in the reality, but face it and address it, if something does come up. All right, breaking down communication barriers. So from this section of the class, what I got from it was there are two areas, the talker and then the listener. So the talker is the one who should be owning the problem. And as I mentioned before, when the person is listening, the person who's listening should not strive to solve the issue, but keep the talker accountable. Keep the talker communicating and progressing in a way where it's going to help him or her resolve their own issue. But the listeners should definitely keep the talker accountable, keep them conversating in a way that is going to make them think, okay, and then eventually help them resolve the issue on their own. All right, and in my conclusion, what's my overarching goal for my life? So when I look at the big picture, number one, I definitely have to stay strong in prayer when it comes to communicating, because verbally communicating is something that really is not a strong point for me. Having that hard conversation is definitely not something that comes easily for me. I don't mind it when someone comes to me. I definitely, listen. But for me to go to someone and say, hey, listen, this is what I've been thinking about. I've had this on my mind. I just want to talk to you about it. It's not something that has come easily for me, but it's something that I definitely need to start working on and start practicing on a regular basis, because there are a lot of things that are going on just in my own personal life and with family members that need to be addressed, and that hard conversation needs to be had. So that's something that I have to just stay in prayer about, and just ask God to just guide me and put the right words, the right choice of words in my mouth, so that I can go ahead and have that have that hard conversation. Now, how does my background and behavior blend influence my conversation? Well, growing up, I was the youngest of 8 children. And growing up, I remember, a lot of conversations going on around me, but being that I was so young, it really wasn't that many conversations going on with me. I was just more so just in the mix, and then listening and experiencing and hearing other conversations. When I think about my mother and father, when my father was living, there were conversations between the two, but I really didn't experience them having many conversations. With my mom and dad being older, I think they were brought up that things weren't discussed with the children, so there were probably a lot of conversations that went on in private that were not made public, to the children or to my siblings. And as far as interacting with me, our conversations were more so about, we didn't really just sit down and just talk about things. It was more so, okay, this is what needs to be done. You have to do this, or I need help with this, or I need to be here for practice, or I need to be picked up at this time from practice. And that was basically the main gut of our conversations. So I have learned from that, and have, with my own family, made it important that we conversate and let our children know that it's important for them to know that they can come to me or to my husband, come to us and talk about anything, regardless of what it is. And sometimes we may just sit down and just talk about something. My son Jordan, he always, we may be riding somewhere and he'll say, okay, well, Mom, how was your day? Just to start that conversation. So I think that's something that is definitely going to be a part of my family tradition, and sitting down. And even today, with my family moving back to my hometown, on Sundays a lot of times we'll gather, a lot of my family members will gather at my mom's house for dinner, and we would have attended church services that morning, and we'll talk about something that maybe the pastor said. So that just sparks a huge conversation or a huge discussion. And a lot of times it'll prompt us to contact a pastor to talk about or get clarification on something. So these past few Sundays have been quite interesting as far as the different topics that have come up. So so that's something that we have actually started. Please forgive me, I'm trying to catch a cold, I believe. How would I deal with conflict? That's another hard thing for me, because I don't like conflict. At the same time, though, I'm not one of those people who just think that everything should just flow perfectly, or be okay. But I mean, I have dealt with conflict, and it's something that I just have to take my time with doing, making sure that I'm listening, making sure I'm understanding what the other person is saying, and let that other person know that I am listening to what they're saying, and that I want to work with them to get the conflict resolved. My action plan is simple. It's basically to stay strong in prayer about my communication, about the choice of words that I use, and to just practice. My main thing is having that hard conversation. So that's something that I'm going to have to really work on moving forward. But at the end of the day, I've seen this commercial several times. Andre Agassi, he's probably my all-time favorite tennis player. But he's on a commercial with his wife Steffi Graf and other family members, and it's a Jacobs Creek commercial, and he says It's not what you say that defines your character, is what you do and how you make that person feel. So at the end of the day, even we have to make sure that our intentions are good and make sure that the other person who's on the other end who's listening knows that what our intentions are, and it's not for us to make them feel bad, but to make them feel good at the end of the day. But that is all I have for today. I have truly enjoyed this course. The discussion boards have been good. I like how Dr. G, you ask the questions in the discussion boards, and it's so funny because I'll respond to the questions that you have for me, but I may be searching through other discussions and I'll see that you've asked somebody else a question, and I'll just jump in and respond to that question as well. But I have truly enjoyed the interaction in this course, and I have truly learned a lot about communication in this class. Thank you very much for your time and your passion about what you're teaching. Thank you.